Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Rana Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important topics. The first is in reference with the political situation of the country and the questions being raised in terms of what is the decision of the current government in terms of the dissolution of the assemblies. Earlier, it was reported that perhaps a date has been decided, 8th of August, maybe the date that the government will decide to dissolve the assemblies. But we then heard the information minister speak about the fact that there is no decision with regards to an official date, and there will be an official announcement after consultation with all PTM parties. And this is important, especially in reference to what the Prime Minister has also spoken about earlier, saying that they will be leaving the government before the completion of its tenure, hinting towards, of course, the possibility of moving forward with elections in 90 days. But it remains unclear still as to what exactly will be the date, and then, of course, the procedures that will follow, whether or not there will be any approval of the summary and whether or not the government will be keeping a margin of 48 hours needed in that regard. At the same time, of course, there is going to be the subsequent issues with regards to the caretaker setup and what sort of a consensus is going to be reached and what the party's decisions have been on the matter. While also looking at the prospect of the upcoming elections later this year, there's also concerns of different political parties and how they will contest, what sort of mandates they're going to present in different provinces, and then, of course, the way that the upcoming parties such as the IPP and the PTIP are going to show up in these elections, and the way that they're going to affect both the provinces of KPK and Punjab, and then, of course, with regards to general elections as well. So we're going to be taking a look at all of this in our first segment and try and understand what is going on with reference to the political dynamics of the country. Our next segment is going to be taking a look at the situation which has been raised time and again by the ruling elite, by the top military establishment in the country, flagging the fact that the Afghan Taliban regime in Afghanistan are providing safe havens to the TTP, something, of course, that Pakistan has been dealing with for quite some time. And since November last, when the ceasefire was ended by TTP, of course, there have been numerous spikes in activities, and the way that the terrorist incidents have increased in Pakistan, especially within this year, is alarming. And so, of course, there is a lot that needs to be done in this regard. We have also heard a statement coming in from the US side also talking about how the Afghan Taliban need to step up with regards to their territory not being used against any other soil, and do not provide safe havens to any terrorist groups or organizations. And this is also important in reference to what the Chief of Army Staff has also spoken about in terms of a warning to the Afghan Taliban, claiming that this is something that they need to do and make sure that their territory is not used against Pakistan or any other soil. And then also that if that is not done so, there is going to be, of course, an effective response from the Pakistan side towards the terrorist organizations. And the fact that in the recent attacks as well, the TTP was able to gain latest weaponry because of the safe havens in Afghanistan. So we're going to be taking a look at the way that Pakistan wants to proceed forward both with the TTP and then the Afghan Taliban, and what sort of a reassurance can be taken on this matter, given the fact that the way that the Afghan Taliban regime has acted previously does not bode well for what is going to happen next. But we're going to take a look at all of this also in our next segment. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farooq Patafi. We've also been joined by Barrister Safi Ghari, who's a political analyst and legal expert. Thank you very much, Safi, for being a part of the show. We've also been joined online by Rana Maqbool Ahmad, Senator PMLN. Thank you very much, Rana Saab, for being a part of the discussion as well. And I'd like to start with you, Rana Saab, because, of course, there seems to be a certain amount of confusion when we talk about the exact date as to when the assemblies are going to be dissolved. I understand the information minister has said there will be an official announcement, but if you could also give us an insight as to what the party members are thinking about and what sort of consultation is still required with the PTM and what factors are currently being mulled over, that would be helpful in terms of understanding what will be the next steps forward.
Thank you, Sana. My Islam to Patafi Sahab. Yes, this issue is there. There are certain misgivings as well. You might have noticed previously once the two leaders met in Dubai, and there was nothing conclusive as far as I understand, and there was no communique afterwards or the press release or the press statement. But even then, the president of the PDM, he objected to it, that it was done without his consultations. There are certain sensitivities in the PDM cadres. So I personally think it is being delayed and discussed with PDM stakeholders, and there will not be a divergent decision as far as already indirectly announced, but they are to be taken into confidence and convinced. If at all they have certain proposals to change the schedule, if justifiably it can be done, it would be done. But
Right.
apparently it doesn't look like, because 8th is the most suitable date, reason being that you have to dissolve the assembly before termination of the assembly tenure. But all the same, you will give at least 48 hours to the president to think over as far as constitution is required. And if he exceeds to the recommendations of the Prime Minister for dissolution of the National Assembly, all okay. If he does not and he delays it, the Assembly will stand dissolved automatically within 48 hours. So those 48 hours period is also to be covered.
Right,
There is a
absolutely.
process of
Rana Sahab, I
negotiation.
understand that, but beyond these procedural matters, is there any other concern or any other sensitivity that you mentioned that is still being thought over, particularly in terms of what different PDM parties are thinking?
Oh yes, because People's Party fundamentally is not part of PDM, though they are the allies with the PDM allies, but they are within the PDM. Therefore, PDM thinks that they should independently consult each other and take decisions independently. That's the only reason why it has been said. And why the Minister of Information has given this statement, just to justify the partners of PDM that, look, you will be consulted and your opinion will be respected. And finally, a joint communique will be issued after the stakeholders of PDM. They discuss with each other, and subsequently People's Party is also taken into confidence, because that's also an important ally of the PDM in toto. So that there is no difference of opinion which can be mentioned as an obstruction in the decision. Decision is almost already taken. It was just a formality to consult the colleagues and to consult the partners, nothing else. There is full consensus on this date, because you can't advance this date at all, or you cannot delay it furthermore, because if you switch over to 10th or 11th, it will not be possible for you, because there is a plan of the PDM allies that they should be given 3 months, 90 days for election campaign and canvassing, etc. Therefore, it has been already decided. There is no ambiguity and there is no stalemate at all.
Right, absolutely. Barrister Safi, when we talk about the date and of course then the subsequent dissolution of assemblies and then the procedures that would follow, it seems that Rana Sahab is quite confident that the different political parties of the PDM and the PPP are on the same page with reference to how this smooth transition will take place. But when we talk about not only this transition, but what is going to follow in terms of the caretaker setup, do you expect any sort of roadblocks and bumps that can possibly be there, or do you think that the entire process will be a smooth one?
Right. So, I believe, Sana, that it's going to be a smooth process. Okay. I don't expect there to be any major obstacle. I believe that a lot of this has already been thought about. A lot of these things have already been discussed. I was hoping that the name of the Prime Minister would also be finalized. It has not been yet, but I'm certain that these are some of those problems that can easily be sorted out. The problem that cannot be sorted out, however, is the problem that has been raised by MQM, and one that I believe that the PDM parties are not looking at fairly, and that is the problem of the census. The fact that they are going to be making the voters list on the census of 2017. Pakistan is a developing country, fast growing nation, very, very high birth rates, a youth bulge, and when we are talking about these things, we have absolutely no clue at this time as to how many new youths have joined in the national voter list. We have no idea how constituencies might have changed, and I think that's one of those major things that the Election Commission is supposed to address. The fact that if you are going to be making halkas, as they call it, they need to be based on populations. They need to be cognizant of the different kinds of geographical, economic and social pressures that shape the constituencies that come about. And the fact that it almost feels like we are rushing into the elections simply to satisfy the constitution. I'm not to suggest, of course, that satisfying the constitution is not important. It is all important, but it needs to be taken in stride with all other factors that affect Pakistan as well, to ensure that there is an equitable outcome. Because an election that does not keep in mind various problems that Pakistan is experiencing and ends up alienating a sizable chunk of people would perhaps be a rigged election, or perhaps be a faulty election to begin with.
I understand that, but do you think that there is a solution to that problem at this point in time?
I would hope that perhaps census results could be sped up. I know that the census is being conducted currently, which is one of the reasons why I don't understand why they've decided that they want to go on a 2017 election. A census can be conducted fairly quickly if the government wants to conduct it, although I understand that it is a painstakingly long and difficult process, and then crunching all the numbers is also very difficult. But once again, I'm not an expert as to the operations of census data gathering, but I would presume that it could be done if the government wanted to.
All right. Farooq, when we take a look at this entire situation and also bringing in, of course, the complications with reference to the upcoming elections, I want to understand that when we talk about the entire process that is going to then follow, particularly in terms of the selection of the caretaker setup, and then, of course, the actual elections with the ACP, what do we think are going to be the certain areas that are going to be of major concern and impact to the political parties who are then going to contest elections? Does it directly affect and impact the political parties as to who will be in charge in the caretaker setup, and then what will be the subsequent decision of the ECP in terms of whether or not they're going to be taking in input from different provinces, as Barrister Safi was suggesting?
Right. Thank you very much, Sana, for the opportunity. First of all, Safi actually mentioned birth rate. So I just wanted to point out that in 2017, the census took place. At that time, our population was slated to be somewhere around 200 million, and now we hear that it has reached 250 million. So you can see how rapidly increasing the population is. And remember, there's another aspect as well, that people, kids who were 13 years old in 2017 are now actually adults. So that also is an important aspect, that who can be part of the electoral process. As far as the idea of accelerating the census is concerned, I don't think it works like that. There has to be a meticulous process, because then you have to come up with results which are not contentious. So with that kind of situation in mind, I understand that why is it that the current coalition wants to go with the 2017 census. Of course, MQM is an outlier. It will not want that at all, because they did not agree with the idea of their population, Karachi's population, actually shrinking while the entire country's population kept on increasing. Having said that, now let us talk about the whole idea about the date issue, and then caretaker setup issue as well, because they are going to be very humongous concerns right now. And we keep on hearing, because in Pakistan, talking heads keep on increasing. There used to be 50 channels. All channels would have at least four pundits or anchors who would be speaking on television. But add to it now the vloggers. So now talking heads have actually reached thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. Because of that, there is too much speculation. Everybody keeps on playing up whatever possible fault lines there might be. One issue that is very clear before our eyes, that today we heard the date of 8th August, and then we saw clarification also. The date issue is very clear. Why is it that the coalition does not want to dissolve the assemblies on 10th? Because the president of Pakistan has a kind of pocket veto of 48 hours. He can keep the assembly with himself. So if they want to dissolve the assembly on 10th, and the president keeps on lingering it on for 48 hours, then the electoral duration of the caretaker setup and all shrinks. It becomes 60 days instead of 90 days, right? So the coalition wants to ensure that the president doesn't have that kind of capacity to sabotage the date. But I think that they are going to keep the cards very close to the chest till the time the date is almost due. Then they are going to actually come up with that. Another very interesting aspect, because we kept on hearing that there is going to be a technocratic setup, then we kept on hearing perhaps a journalist is going to be there, an economist is going to be there, there's that and the other thing. But because there's so much rumor mongering in this country, I think that propaganda is also reaching the coalition partners, and I think they want to be very careful in deciding who becomes the caretaker setup, so that it doesn't actually turn into something else that might actually get prolonged because of the factors that Safi actually mentioned. So now what we are hearing is perhaps a retired politician might be nominated for the caretaker setup, on whom most parties will have agreement. So if that happens, again we are going to hear it very near the final dates. That is going to be somewhere between 8th of August and 10th of August.
All right, and perhaps Rana Sahab can give us a better input with regards to this election as well. And Rana Sahab, I want to understand who it is that you think is going to be most likely the nominated candidate for the caretaker setup, and whether or not conversation about this has already begun with the opposition.
Yes, if you allow me, I can have a few words about the census issue.
Sure.
Well, what I understand, census is already complete, but subsequent to the finalization of census, there is another big task which is to be performed by the Election Commission. That is formation of new constituencies in accordance with the consensus. That takes about 3 to 4 months. That is the plea of MQM, and they are saying it. Once census has been carried out, why the new constituencies are not being created or formed? So that is the question. I personally think the affected or aggrieved person are likely to approach the courts of law on this. Let's see what does the court of law do about it, but that issue will be there till it's finally decided by the court of law. What else? What the question was you were asking me, Sarai?
Rana Sahab, with reference to the caretaker setup, I wanted to know if there is any insight that you can give us, and whether or not there's conversation with the opposition.
There is a variety of opinion within the PDM and the People's Party. People's Party, you might have heard on television as well, the advisor to the Prime Minister, Mr. Kaira, saying that we want a politician. And some other segments of PDM, they're also of the opinion that the politician should be the caretaker. You know the apprehension of the people in PDM and their allies, technocrat or an economist or whatnot. They want a politician who should be purely a politician and should be able to govern the issues for these next 3 months. Therefore, I personally think the final consensus will be on a politician, but it's very difficult to choose and select and search for a politician who would be suitable to deliver during these 3 months. So that is still an enigma, but so far no decision has been taken. But the tilt of the PDM is for a politician instead of a technocrat or other occupational experts. So that is there. And personally think consensus has to be built before the National Assembly is dissolved, because as soon as the National Assembly is dissolved, the caretaker Prime Minister has to take over. Yes, subsequently, the caretaker Prime Minister has to select his own cabinet with different portfolios. That will be subsequent to the selection of the Prime Minister. So I think that that issue will be overcome by the collective wisdom of PDM and the allies. I don't think so that will be a big issue. But since it's in the process of thinking and consultations and parleys, therefore many points are raised. As Mr. Patafi has rightly mentioned about a host of anchors and a rather large number of anchors who continue commenting, and they have 24 hours with them for every channel. So many opinions will continue flowing in, and you will have to listen to and face volleys of opinions. But once final decision is taken, that will be duly announced in time. I don't think so that's a big problem, except for I've already mentioned That's a legal and constitutional issue as well about the census and the formation of new constituencies or extension of constituencies. That is really a constitutional issue. Whether the caretaker government will be able to handle it without facing the court or afterwards arguing their case in the court, they get it decided in their favor. If the court does decide different way, so then there'll be a different issue of elections.
All right. Barrister Savi, there's also, of course, the aspect of how the different political parties are going to move forward with the elections, and whether or not this is going to be something that will center around two major political parties, or how will the emergence of new parties such as the IPP and, of course, the PTIP are going to impact, and whether or not there is going to be any sort of space in these elections for the current PTI.
Right. So, fantastic question, Sana. And I think it's all a work in progress. I spoke to some major leaders of PTI yesterday who were mulling over joining the PTIP because Mahmood Khan, the former chief minister, has now jumped ship. And I was informed personally that close to 20 major leaders of the KPK province are currently thinking where they want to be, and they're a little confused, but it's likely that they will join PTIP. So we can see that this is a work in progress. There's a lot of people who are jumping ships, going from different parties to different parties. We've already seen 2 parties having been formed in the last 1 month maybe, and I wouldn't put it beyond us to form some other parties. I feel like time is ripe. People might start the idea of pushing for local regional parties. We're seeing that regional parties are coming up in Punjab and KPK. But I feel that now regional parties and nationalist parties are going to make a comeback in Balochistan. And I remember that there was this party called the GDA, Grand Democratic Alliance in Sindh, which challenged the People's Party. And since the wave seems to be that people are making independent parties, that's definitely going to happen. Another very interesting phenomenon that I would like to point out at this stage is the fact that due to the recent kind of shufflings between governments and the kind of things that are happening, whereas new parties are being formed, an unprecedented number of people are also choosing to contest elections independently. And this is because, once again, we have seen what happens when they join parties. Every time they join parties, they have to choose sides, and there's a party leader who acts like a despot and kicks them around whenever they want to. So a lot of people might think this time around that it might be a good idea to contest independently. If they win seats, then join a party afterwards. And anyone who has done so in the past has in fact had an edge over those who have had the parties. So it's very clear that at this stage, it's anyone's game. Anyone could take the lead. We have no knowing what's going to happen, but whatever's happening is quite interesting.
All right. And Farooq, I'm sure you have something to add to that, but I also want to talk about the issue with regards to where Pakistan stands economically as well. And we, of course, got a major achievement in terms of the deal that was finally struck in the last hours with the IMF. And, of course, that's an important step forward for Pakistan. But it also means that there will be an important measure within this standby arrangement that is going to be taken by the caretaker setup. And that is, of course, going to be something which has to be done so with responsibility. And at the same time, we also talked about how the SIFC should be able to at least transcend these political dynamics and work towards getting in more investment. Do you think that given the political scenario and the focus of different parties on the election campaign, both of these things will be possible?
Right, Sana. I think that first of all, I wanted to address the issue of PTI and independent, candidates, because that is very important. As per the reports or interviews that are given by current chairman PTI, that is going to be their plan B. If the party is banned for some reason, they will be contesting as independents. But now let us also talk about PTIP that was created yesterday, because that is a very important development. Yesterday I kept on saying that at the start, when other people were leaving the party, I said, until Parvez Khatak leaves the party, I'm not convinced that PTI is done with, right? But then they did something very amazing. They ended up naming their party PTIP. It rings a bell. What exactly? During General Musharraf's time, People's Party was not being allowed to participate in elections. because its leadership was banned to participate in elections. What happened? They created Pakistan People's Party parliamentarians, and that under Amin Fahim's leadership actually participated in elections, and they came to the parliament, right? And after that, of course, they have been quite influential. Even now, the parliamentary party of People's Party is essentially Pakistan People's Party parliamentarians whose head is Asif Ali Zardari, not Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, right? So one would think that this is that kind of a situation, that perhaps it is like PTI's second coming, or some kind of attempt to allow its people to reach parliament and then get back to the party. But then we keep on hearing the rhetoric coming from Pervez Khattak as well. So what we hear is that this party is going to be really a big deal, and it is going to be very influential in coming days. Now let us talk about the question regarding economy. Remember earlier I was saying that there is a possibility of a caretaker prime minister who might be an economist. Why? What has changed? I think the only thing that has changed is this standby arrangement from IMF. Because of that agreement, now we can comfortably think that there will be, no matter whosoever is Prime Minister of Pakistan, even if he is not an economist, he can have an able finance minister who will take care of the circumstances and who will ensure that the economy keeps on moving according to the commitments. Because of that, I think that these 3 months, and by the way, it is also being debated whether in the future we need a caretaker setup, because I think it is a superfluous idea and it only creates more confusion, because right now we are speculating who is going to be Prime Minister of Pakistan for 3 months. In essence, like India, essentially it should be that the incumbent continued to the election day, but their powers are taken away by the election commission, and election commission then controls who actually retires, who is posted, who serves where, right? So in that kind of a situation, I think that minus SIFC, rest of economic package can continue, SBA can continue. Now SIFC, I think that the ideal time for any kind of investment to come would be before this government goes, right? Or then when the next government actually comes, I mean elected government comes into power. So with that kind of a situation, I don't think that I expect any fireworks during the caretaker setup, unless you end up having some kind of caretaker setup where which goes beyond 3 months. So if that doesn't happen, I think these 3 months can be managed.
All right. Rana Sahab, with reference to what the PMLN is planning, of course, in terms of its election campaign, it's important that the role that its leadership will be playing, particularly, of course, the current Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, and then, of course, the leader, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, and then, of course, the role that is going to be led by Ms. Maryam Nawaz as well. Can you give us clarity in terms of what sort of election campaign is being planned by the PMLN and the role that different political leaders are going to be playing in that part? And then, of course, moving forward, who will be the prime ministerial candidate?
Yes, lot many news and information, pieces of information about the envisaged program is already with the people. For example, it has been decided that Maryam Nawaz, as she is the chief organizer, she'll be playing a very important role in organizing the party, and especially in case, which is definitely going to happen, Mia Nawaz Sharif returns, he has to be, so that responsibility of the organizer to motivate people to organize a reception in a historical way, so that an impact is created, and then we get going with force and with strength, political strength, to win the elections. As far as the organizational matters and the leadership and different decisions are concerned, the president of the party will be playing a very important role, Mr. Shehbaz Sharif, because he is such an astute politician. and he has a long experience of about 40 years fighting the political battles. So therefore, this experience and genius of the party put together, inshallah, it will be an impregnable political party again, despite all inadequacies previously and all sufferings they had to undergo. Now they'll be coming in a different shape with new vigor and new determination. Yes, as far as the decision about, which is very important, about seat adjustments is concerned, the party is not very eager to have seat adjustments with other political parties, except for having a very marginal scope for one or two parties, uh, 3, 4, 5 seats, not more than that, because they want elections to be conducted with their own strength and making an appeal to the people. Of course, there is a difficulty because skyrocketing prices and this unbridled inflation has created obstructions in the way of politicians, undoubtedly. But the political parties, they'll have to explain to the people what's the real story. And the remedy to the problem would be efforts with great determination and with genuine planning, as they have been doing already. And especially
Right.
Mian Nawaz Sharif has a past of contributing, bringing prosperity, going for spectacular development in all socio-economic sectors, including the foreign policy. And he has already delivered his road network, his defensive impregnability, his successful foreign policy, his electricity projects, and
Right.
whatnot. It's innumerable.
Absolutely.
So
Rana
people
Sahab,
have confidence.
yes, absolutely. We'll be moving on to our next segment, which is going to be, of course, with regards to the security front in reference to the issue that Pakistan has been dealing with for quite some time now. And we'll focus on the way forward with the TTP and the role of the Afghan Taliban. And I'll start with you. When we talk about this particular issue, Pakistan has time and again given statements with reference to the role that Afghan Taliban can and should be playing in terms of course, protecting its territory being used against any other territory, and then now specifically with reference to the safe havens that are being provided to the TTP. And we also heard the Chief of Army Staff say so in strict terms that this is something that will not be tolerated by Pakistan. But I want to understand what is the strategy forward, given the fact that this is not something that we have had much luck with or any sort of positive response coming in from the Afghan Taliban side. How will we then proceed in the future, and what sort of expectation or assurance can there possibly be from the Afghan Taliban?
And Sana, of late, unfortunately, this gateway to the terrorists was opened by the previous government, and especially three persons, namely the leader of PTI and the DG ISI of those days, and the chief of the military organization, unfortunately. Despite the fact I already once or twice told you, in the parliament, once they were giving this proposal, let's mend fences with TTP, the parliamentary participants cried hoarse before them, for God's sake, don't do this. It cannot work. They are incorrigible. Don't do this. Despite the fact it did that, and not only the fugitive culprits and the terrorists, they got the jet black convicts who were responsible for multiple murders released from the court with the courtesy and the affection of the President of Pakistan. So that was the new dimension of giving an assistance and facilitating the terrorists to come over into KPK especially, and they have created havoc. Now the situation has become more critical because you might have heard the statement of Mr. Zabihullah, the spokesperson of Afghan government. Once the army chief of Pakistan and the defense minister said that they should play a role, the Afghan government play a role in containing this segment of terrorism because they are bound by under Doha agreement, etc. But the spokesperson, Mr. Zabiullah, said in reply to these statements, no, we have an agreement with Americans, not with anybody else. So what does it mean? That there is a very massive dimension of threat and problematic situation which is being created by our contiguous state.
Right.
Undoubtedly, as you have said, that we have to now go with a more stronger policy against them. Number one is operation has to be very, very effective, systematic, and continuous. Number two, we have to re-raise the wall which was broken into by those people from across the border. Number three, the public cooperation is to be elicited from within the people, because community has to also be co-opted to fight this menace for the crusade against these people. And more so, the most immediate is to have a very strong diplomatic onslaught,
All right.
because there are countries, Muslim countries, who continue communicating, though not directly with them. We'll have to muster support from them as well, and
Right.
tell them, for God's sake, they should behave. Don't harm
Absolutely.
the Muslim country.
Absolutely, Rana Saab, and thank you very much for that, and thank you for being part of the debate as well. Barrister Safi, when we take a look at this situation, there also seems to be a statement that has come in from the U.S. side, and it has sort of also been followed by the statement that we have earlier seen coming in from the Chief of Army Staff as well. Do you think that this somehow points towards some sort of cooperation that we can expect with regards to the Afghan Taliban, in terms of at least protecting Pakistan and other such territories by the U.S., and especially in terms of the Doha Agreement as well, and what sort of issues or assurances perhaps can be taken in from international partners such as the U.S. in this manner?
Right. So, Sana, I believe that when the Taliban issued their statement saying that, oh, the Doha Accords were with the United States of America and not with Pakistan, there was an unnecessary alarm within Pakistan, and I believe that perhaps we overreacted to the statement without digging a little deeper into what the statement was and what the Doha Accords are. The Doha Accords with the United States of America, although it is with the United States of America, clearly state, number one, that the Taliban cannot use their territory for terrorist attacks anywhere in the world. So, I mean, I presume anywhere would obviously mean Pakistan. But secondly, the Doha Accords very clearly specify that there are 8 non-NATO allies that cannot be attacked using one territory, and those non-NATO allies on the very top is Pakistan. So that is not something that I'm concerned about. Even if the Taliban say that we are bound by the Doha Accord and it is with the US, fair enough. We don't have anything to worry about. They include us. The reason I believe that the Taliban did this, and if they did so, perhaps I'm giving them extra credit than I ought to be. But the reason why I would do so, the reason why I believe that the Taliban did so is because of the Montevideo Convention on the recognition of states. So far, the Afghan Taliban government is not a recognized government within Afghanistan, and the Afghan Taliban have this consistent problem when dealing with any international organization. When they go to international banks, when they go and talk with an international organization, the reply is, well, you're not the government, because the official government is still the ousted government. And that is because of the recognition of that government. So the Afghan Taliban want to drill it in. They wanted to conduct a maneuver that would somehow force the superpower of the world, which in this particular case is the United States of America, to come forward and state that it is the Afghan Taliban's responsibility to ensure that this does not happen. However, I did, of course, watch the press conference. Anthony Blinken was careful not to mention that the government is it is the Afghan Taliban government that is responsible. They still refer to the Afghan Taliban as an organization. So this is a dispute that I believe will continue to go forward. The Taliban will continue to elicit a response. This is a cry for attention. They will continue to make empty threats in the hopes that international organizations, international countries would start recognizing them as the government in charge, and once they get that recognition, then only can they play a part in the international polity.
All right. Farooq, then I want to understand, if we take a look at the scenario in these terms, what sort of scope exists then for Pakistan to deal with the issue and the spike in terrorist activities, particularly by the TTP within our own territory. Of course, there are a number of measures that Rana Sahib earlier was pointing out, but none of those actually include sort of being able to protect the fact that there will be safe havens outside of Pakistan provided through TTP. How can we move ahead without that sort of assurance being present there and still being able to protect our own citizens?
Right, Sana, because I'm going to say some very angry things, perhaps hurtful things. First of all, I wanted to actually get a few things out of my way, because I wanted to praise certain people as well. But regarding this question that you asked, Pakistan does have a lot of levers when it comes to forcing Afghan Taliban to cooperate, and I think that will continue, right? Now let me first of all praise the current army chief, the current DG ISI, and then our counter-terrorism wing of ISI as well, foreign minister, prime minister. They're all very clear-headed people. They understand what is at stake and how to try to fix it. Having said that, they don't have the kind of leverage that the previous government had, and I think that the previous government actually should be asked, and by government I don't mean merely the former prime minister, but the former army chief and the former DGISI also, because they kind of threw everything away. We kept on fighting war on terror for quite some time. We had actually totally demolished the terrorists, and all of a sudden we started seeing this appeasement of Taliban, on both sides of the border, by these three gentlemen. And these three gentlemen actually are responsible for something very eerie. Sana, whenever it comes to foreign policy, because most countries have more than one political force, you get some kind of leverage to maneuver by actually leveraging each side against the other. And amazingly, the three gentlemen that I'm talking about, the former DGISI, the former army chief, the former prime minister, they somehow did something astounding. And that is something that kept on happening during their time in not one but two countries that we have been obsessing about since 1947. One India, the other one Afghanistan. The total demolition of any counterpoint or any counter voice in these countries. So right now in India, you have no other choice but to talk to Modi whenever he is there, right? Because there is hardly any opposition. There is no opposition leader in India. Similarly, when it comes to Afghanistan, there also total abolition of any other counter voice that could have taken on Taliban. So what are we stuck with? We are stuck with the Taliban regime that is going to be there, and you'll have to cajole, coax, blackmail, or force them through international influences. But I want to ask everybody who is listening, why is it that, and I hope someday, if the state of Pakistan cannot carry out that inquiry, then perhaps history will do its own job. But somebody someday has to inquire about these three gentlemen and their influence and the kind of maddening policies they continued that actually still is costing Pakistan lives of our soldiers, of our law enforcement people. And because of all that chaos and that appeasement, Pakistan finds itself rather marginalized, even though Pakistan keeps on struggling back to be mainstream. And Pakistan has succeeded in the last 1.5 years to get many things right. But one has to ask, who were they serving when they were doing all these mad policies or pursuing these mad policies?
Absolutely, and there are lots of questions that Pakistan, of course, needs to address itself as well, and there needs to be a lot of effort that has to be done within the territory as well, and of course then beyond it too. Thank you very much, Farooq, for that. Thank you, Barrister Safi, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.